Supposed to start at 7 o'clock. Samantha's on.
They're on, if you want me to.
He's right up there. All three of them are real.
Sorry, for the third time, and then I'm gonna take my seat here. I would suggest that whoever we don't pick, if we try and make sure that we keep them kind of involved or associated, because we're gonna need community advocates before too long. And I think that certainly the two of the three that we're not gonna pick could be a really good foundation for that.
The other group that we have to, or not we, but.
That needs to materialize.
Exactly, I think. Yeah. I think all three, I mean, I think the one thing we want to make sure we do is make it a good experience for any of the people who are on this group that are not necessarily on a board or a commission, because I think us as a group, as a town, I think we lack that kind of involvement. So I think any person, I think we need to just make it a good experience for them. And then hope that they want to continue to help out in the town and volunteer and join other boards and commissions.
I agree. It's something that we fall a little short on, and to make sure that we keep all three of these people engaged and in our forward thinking for different roles, if not this one. But I think again, that they can all be used here as well. I know there's beginnings of a pack, and whichever two are not on here could certainly be a big piece of that, which will be very important. Anybody that went to the it was South Windsor, yeah, it was South Windsor's, that they had the pack that was really instrumental in getting the word out. So whichever ones are not on here can help with that for certain.
Jeff, can I ask, you're affiliated as, you're an unaffiliated voter, right? You're a U? Okay, cool. Any of them are good, then we don't have a minority representation issue. We can pick any of the three.
I don't even know what I know Ray is, I mean,
He's U, and the other two are E's.
When I had put the names that I had put forward, I thought that having somebody in the senior population would be beneficial, but I guess we're in a good pickle when we have three
excellent people who want to be a part of this.
For my 2 cents, I'm gonna say the two that really catch my eye are Randy Clifton and Al Raymond, because they have been in this community for quite some time. I've worked with Al with Little League and soccer for a long time. I don't know Mr. Clifton, but I've heard things that he's been doing. And to take nothing away from Ms. Muska, as a recent resident of East Windsor, I appreciate the fact that I would like her to go, you know, I prefer these other two because they've been here longer. They have probably more connections.
Yes, yeah. I know that when it came to voting time, that's where I worked with both Carol and Randy. That Randy got his entire condo association out to the polls. They had the best turnout that I've ever seen. So he obviously knows how to get the word out and get people moving. So if that's of any help whatsoever. Well, it might be if we have him represent, or whoever this is represent the committee, like for the senior population.
Also, if you're on the committee, you can't be involved.
So would it be better than to have him mover and shaker?
I don't know that that's true. I think that this body cannot be associated with the PAC, but I do think individuals can participate, just as most of us are elected officials, but also affiliate with a town committee. I think it's the same thing. Why do you think not?
I just thought that the PAC needed to be a totally separate entity.
Separate in the sense that we can't commingle public funds or resources. And we can't advocate for,
Piece and not for the,
I don't think that any one of us or any collection of us are precluded from participation in the PAC or the work associated with that. I can't swear to that, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
That's my question. He seems to be a really good advocate. It might be better off in the pack and then
Yeah.
maybe on the committee. It'd be a great resource. Somebody who's already got boots on the ground.
good point.
That's what my head was.
Are we voting? Like, do we need a motion on the table?
It's up to us to appoint the person, so yeah. We'll need a motion.
I'll make a motion to support Al Raymond as the final participant in the, final seat in the ad hoc committee.
I'll second it.
So motion was made by Fran, seconded by Heather to appoint, Al Raymond as the ad hoc final, at-large member. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
I,
Opposed? And I know that,
Sarah's abstaining.
Sarah abstained. Okay, here, get that. See that? Don't forget her. Thank you all. Very thoughtful, and I can read about it and then be able to do it.
Cause they sound like they'd be ready.
Yeah, for the pack.
Yeah.
And it's super important as well. It will be important. Now we are to the point where we need his cheek.
And they can hear, I just,
They can hear?
yes.
Okay.
Jim, how many fingers am I holding up?
I can't see you.
Samantha
You can't see me.
as well?
Where are you sitting?
I'm here. I
I'm-
just can't see everybody.
Camera's focused down over here.
Yeah, I see everybody sitting to my right. I see someone waving. I can't make out who that is. I can see all the way over to the corner of the table, and then that's it. Hey, there you are. Now I see you.
Yeah, you just, yeah, that's Sandy. Now can you see Patrick? Oh,
Yeah, now we can.
Okay, cool. It's moving back.
I'm supposed to track the voice.
Distracting the crowd.
Yeah, it keeps going back to the crowd.
That's fine. We're all here, Jim.
There you go. So, we are on to item number 3 on the agenda, which is, has to do with the AI summary of the NSPECS meeting that we had last week. I know that everything was, that was with the packet, so you got that yesterday, right? So you've had a chance to read it. Patrick and I talked about it and felt that it was a good idea for you all to see just a summary of the, it's attached to this. A summary of what our last conference call meeting was all about. As I think I had said, it was a lot about numbers and take 50 feet off of that one and add 200 feet over there. And does anybody on the commission have any questions about that? Or comments?
I was just curious because I'm newer who Fran is.
Fran,
Oh, no.
oh, sorry, I think she's referring to, so, Fran is one of the consultants through CSG. Her background was retired, or previous, like, superintendent administrator that also has like the construction background and works with CSG. And she's been, correct me if I'm wrong, Samantha and, Jim, but she's really kind of the lead when it comes to the ed specs, correct?
Yeah, she she provides us insight into what you have to do, Patrick. and really kind of is an advocate for you guys in terms of understanding, helping us understand how you how you teach your program, right? But like you said, she does have she is a former school teacher, principal, administrator. She knows, how these programs work and how to make a program more efficient.
Did that clarify it for you? Any other questions about that?
You joined us left at my house before.
When, I saw that there were key questions and some action items, what's the anticipation for, this portion itself to be finalized, I guess, for the Broad
Broderick Ed specs, when do you expect them to be finalized? Samantha or Jim?
Well, I think there's a few things that need to happen before we can finalize them.
That's right.
So I
The
sent
fifth
out a,
grade issue.
I'm sorry?
The fifth grade issue is a biggie, right?
Yeah, and so I know we've had multiple conversations, last week leading up to this meeting about what the next steps are and having a plan to move forward. I'm not sure what the AI summary says. I don't think I've seen that. So, but in terms of the ed specs, I think one of the major questions is where fifth grade is going to go. If you want to keep fifth grade with the middle high school, or if fifth grade is going to get moved over to the elementary school. That's a huge driver in how the ed specs are written, because if we move fifth grade, we have to basically revise both sets of ed specs. The other caveat to all of this too is we have an issue, I guess, with space, and making sure that the ed specs and the space matrices align with the Connecticut space standards. Now, I know we've talked about in previous meetings in terms of a renovate to new project versus new construction. And if we, for the middle high school specifically, stick to a renovate to new project, you would be more likely to be able to keep the space that you have and work within the confines of that, rather than do a new construction where you would be severely limited in the space that you're allowed to have based on your enrollment. So that's kind of where we're at. We're just, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, we're just kind of waiting on some direction to see what the committee and or the Board of Ed want to do with the fifth grade.
Yeah, I think we do have space matrices for both scenarios for the fifth grade, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. So in the information that I sent over earlier today, there's a few things. So there's a space matrix for both the elementary school and the middle high school based on the current version of the ed specs. There's another sheet that says the different scenarios of what it would entail moving the fifth grade over to the elementary school, and then reducing some of the spaces in the middle high school, or making some of the spaces become more shared spaces rather than individualized. And then you have a summary of kind of where we're at in terms of the existing square footage versus the square footage that we currently have in the ed spec. So we kind of laid out all the scenarios. I was trying not to kind of overwhelm everyone with information because I know it can be a lot of numbers, but you do have the space matrices for both projects, which essentially guides the ed specs in terms of space and programming.
So Samantha and Jim, I have to say, I got this in an email this afternoon at like 3 something. It's very complex information. And for anybody on this committee to be able to digest it and have any kind of questions for you, they're just seeing it for the first time now. So I don't know that I have asked, and I know that Patrick has as well. We need to get this stuff a little bit earlier so that the committee has the time to digest the stuff before a meeting. so that we can talk about it.
But in fairness, I think that they're here tonight kind of as a overall courtesy. They, I believe, thought that this was supposed to be just us talking about this. To
Yeah,
Jeff's point from last meeting, so that they would be part of this 2 weeks from now. So I'm not sure that that's fair to put on them.
I guess. So we were supposed to get this today?
No, but I'm saying like, this isn't, I don't think from their perspective, they're expecting us to have an opinion on this tonight. Is that fair to say, CSG folks?
yeah, I
Yes.
think based on the last meeting, it seemed like you guys wanted to have this meeting to kind of talk amongst yourselves and kind of digest all the information that we've given you up till this point. So we put this
Not
together
including-
because, I'm sorry?
And not including what you sent today. I
Well,
thought it included what you sent today.
Yeah, no, but also I think if you if you remember, we had adjustments that we had to make based on our meeting last Friday, in which those adjustments were I think finalized
Like
late
yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, like
Well,
I'm not sure what the full intent of this meeting was for, like I said, and what Jason said, from my understanding, it was for you guys kind of to talk amongst yourselves and kind of figure out how you want to move forward. So
Yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle. So I know, it was my understanding is that this group, wanted to have some further discussions. I know that there were some questions, and so, that was the intent of having CSG available. I know that, and I believe, and Samantha, I'm just looking at the documents, like to Denise's point, I didn't have time to look at them, either, but, if I'm correct, at the back of the document, the last at least 3 pages, is that the Q and A?
Yeah,
Because I know like Jeff submitted, we have Jeff here that submitted questions. And I think that was part of,
Oh, yeah.
that was part of it was,
Yeah. Go ahead.
so I'm looking at it now for the first time too, but, those are the questions that we submitted to you on behalf of, this board and the Board of Ed, correct? Is that what that is in the back of the document?
Yep.
Yeah, so I took a list and I spoke and kind of had to collaborate with GWWO to get those responses formalized for you guys. So that's why I was able, I sent them out today and I couldn't get them out earlier. But yeah, those are all the questions and comments that I had received. I believe you sent me a summary email with all of the questions. So those are the responses to the questions. If we want to talk about them, we can. But again, I wasn't 100% sure what the goal of this meeting was.
I think those questions are the ones that everybody expected some kind of answers and discussion about.
Which we have. But, and actually, number one is an interesting, so that talks about the square footage that needs to remain in order for it to be eligible for a renovation. So if, so that means if we were to knock down half of, or 40% of a building, and keep 60%, but also then do in addition, how does that, what square footage are they looking for at that point? Are they looking for their state standard, or do we still have the waiver concerns? Because we have too much square footage now. So if we're going to try and approach the state about getting a space waiver so that we can accommodate special education and some of the specialized programs that we offer, which by all measures are successful, what is our best option to be able to accomplish those two things? Is that renovate as new, or is that new construction? Jim, you're muted.
You're muted.
That was a great answer, but you're muted.
All right. Sorry about that. I would say renovate as new would be your best option and best argument to keep what you have, or be able to go over the space standards. There's no guarantee. The state is being extremely strict with the space standards. We will have to make a very strong argument. But one of my concerns is we have to look at the cost of a renovation project relative to a cost of a new school. And the new school, if you look at the space standards, would be much smaller. I can't remember what the square footage was. I want to say it was around 70,000 square feet, if I'm not mistaken. That may end up being less expensive to construct than renovating as new the entire, I think, 124,000 square feet of your high school now. If that's
So
the
we
case,
forego a lot of square footage.
yeah, if that's the case, the state may say, well, we'll give you a new school at the same reimbursement of a renovation, but you gotta have a smaller school.
And I have heard in the pipeline of the town that there are two possible developments in the Warehouse Point section of town that will have combined over 700 units of apartment space. Two units. One is 406, one is 306, and the other one is 400 units. One's at the corner of Route 5 and 191, somewhere over that area. And the other one,
There's no submission in the pipeline for that.
no?
That had been
Yeah.
10 years ago, but the developer's not, he's working in Texas now.
Okay.
So
That's
I
not a real
think,
one. The other one is,
Yeah, the one by
So-
Geisler's, that was 306.
but those are 1 and 2 bedroom units. It's going to be comparable to the mansions, which as we talked about, yielded a de minimis number of students in the school system.
Right.
yeah, so were you trying to say that these new developments will increase the enrollment?
The
That's your
demographer
point,
does,
right, Sam?
Yeah, I'm just worried. But
the
Well-
demographer does take into account, go ahead, Sam.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the demographer does take into account new developments, potential new developments, new housing to a certain. I'm not sure what they or what their method of determining that would be. It's a very complicated calculation, and I think everything is spelled out in the enrollment projection, if I'm not mistaken, as to what they what they consider for future development.
Yeah, I can pull it up and share it if you guys want to take a look at it real quick.
One thing real quick, I did get double booked this evening. I do have another meeting I need to get to. I apologize. I didn't realize I was double booked. But Samantha's going to stay with you, and she's more than capable to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Joe, for the news.
Okay, thank you. I apologize again.
That's okay.
All right.
So
Patrick, you
I
saying
can-
that the mansion
can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Ten
Okay.
elementary students, 1 middle school, no high school.
Yeah, if it was a subdivision, single family houses, that's much, much more likely to get a family. But a
So-
1 and 2 bedroom generally.
So you guys should have a copy of this presentation. I believe I sent it to Denise for you guys to get distributed to you guys. But basically what this does is it does essentially a 10-year projection out, and we did this last year. So it does a 10-year projection out from starting last year all the way to 2033. So this gets submitted with the grant application to the state. And what the state does is they take the highest 8-year projected enrollment. This box would get shifted by a year because we're technically in the 2024-25 school year. So this box would get shifted by a year, but even still, your highest overall enrollment that the state would consider what is 490. I'm sorry. 1,064 students, or wait, I'm sorry, hang on. It's 490 for pre-K to 4. And then it's 317 and 279 for grades 5 to 8 and 9 to 12. So the state uses this as like a rationale for space standards based on the highest enrollment. They don't consider any like sort of future developments or anything, even if they're in the pipeline.
Yeah, I think that's where the question was coming, Samantha. So, like, I know we've reviewed that report in depth, and I know it's been presented on it, and it was explained, back when it was presented by, I believe it was SLAM, that they can't include like, speculated growth. I guess the way I'm understanding, like Fran's question is okay, this wasn't in the works, and let's say there was a large housing, development, whether it's single families or not. Like, does that get taken in or consideration when it becomes a real thing and the project, you know, isn't even like breaking ground yet or designs haven't been developed?
Yeah, well, the enrollment projections that they did take into account, and you can see in the report, they take into account families that move in, families that move out, age of residents, new developments that are currently being built. So it takes into consideration a lot of that, but I believe a lot of the new developments in town have been for more so like 55 and over housing, which is not really a demographic where you would see kids in elementary school to middle school and maybe even high school sometimes.
Samantha, if I remember correctly, because this was a while back that we got all of that from Vivian.
Last February.
Didn't we, and to Fran's credit, I mean, she's been worried about that all along. Didn't we ask that the higher estimate be the one that we use? Wasn't there like a middle of the road and a lower and then a higher?
Yeah, typically on school projects, we always use the middle of the road one. I believe I'd have to go back and look, but I believe the higher one wasn't even that much higher, honestly. Yeah, your high. So let's see. Just looking at it real quick, your highest enrollment was let's see. It looks like 1,133 students in the whole district. So you're looking at, with the medium enrollment, the highest amount would be 1,073. So, I mean, there is a difference, but typically the state likes to use the middle of the road one. You can't go on the higher end of the spectrum.
That's what I was gonna ask, is if there was a state requirement.
Why have a higher end of the spectrum?
I could
That's
be,
just how the demographers do it. They always run like a low, medium, high model. And the middle one is usually the one that everyone uses to forecast. And based on your enrollment over the past few years, you guys haven't seen much of an uptick in enrollment.
But I have
Over
to say, I know that this is my point, is that our enrollment over the past few years has been something different because we have had a different level of attention to rigor in the school district. And we have switched the focus with Patrick so that rigor is a very important thing to us, and our numbers are climbing. And as numbers climb, that's what happened to South Windsor. South Windsor got slammed because they became the school district that you wanted to move into. And I don't expect us to be on the same level as South Windsor. But as our numbers climb, we're not going to be the pariah town that you don't want to move there if you have kids.
But our numbers, our last enrollment numbers that Patrick gave us last month are lower than they were last year.
I will say that is primarily, I believe that is primarily because of the kindergarten, the age for that.
So it's a
So- Just to comment on the South Windsor thing, and I believe the demographers said this when they presented this initially, a lot of the reason why South Windsor's enrollment went up was potentially partly.
Go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just, historically, when I moved into town 13 years ago, the place you wanted to live was South Windsor. Because South Windsor had the school district, which is why they went and they redid all their schools, is because everybody from everywhere else moved in. So they went and they expanded their school district, and unfortunately they didn't do it big enough because of what you're about to talk about. But what I'm saying is that when we moved to South Windsor, Patrick, cover your ears. People said, don't move there if you have kids because they're gonna get hooked on drugs and the school district stinks. It's not the case anymore. Not that the drug thing was the case anyways, but that's not the case anymore. We've been doing a lot of work on improving the rigor of the school district and getting more and more things available to all ends of the curriculum spectrum. And I'm afraid that we are going to become attractive. We already are to a certain degree to the special ed people because we have such a strong program. So I would like to use, if we're going to go use a number, I believe we can make a case to use at the very least, the high end number in the enrollments.
I can't, I understand what you're saying. Unfortunately, I can only tell you what we do on, like what we've done on past projects and what the state is looking towards. I believe Jim mentioned earlier too, the state is really cracking down on space and enrollment numbers. So it is getting a little bit more challenging to get things like space waivers and stuff. It's not impossible, but they are cracking down on it. So, I mean, again, I think I've said it a few times. If you want to get your legislators involved and have them start making that case, that's totally fine. But as someone who you hired for our opinion and for our advice, I can't tell you necessarily to use the higher model because I wouldn't be being honest. Does that make sense?
It does. Can you do
And
something?
I totally respect what you're saying. And I think
Yeah.
that question did come up a lot too when the demographers were presenting. But they said too that a lot of the enrollment increases were due to an influx of like a Southeast Asian population that kind of moved in to the district.
That was
so
South Windsor.
Yes, South
But
Windsor.
yeah, that was recent South Windsor, but I'm like, before, I have friends 20 years ago moved to South Windsor for the schools for their kids,
Mhm.
20 years ago. And even longer. And so South Windsor was the place to go because they had a school district that was very strong in academics,
Mhm.
which is where we're going. And I'm afraid that we're going to build a school that in 2 years we're going to outgrow, or 4 years we're going to outgrow. And everybody's going to say, well, what have you done that for?
Samantha,
Yeah,
even if-
I hear what you're saying. I mean, it's a valid point. I think in the state's eyes, they look at the enrollment projection that's been done by a professional demographer and they go by that. They don't go by potential what if scenarios. Unfortunately,
In this case, I don't think it's a what if. That's my 2 cents. I know the work that Daryl has been doing, all of his presentations, our numbers are on the rise. And then the numbers are on the rise, people are going to say, oh, East Windsor's not a bad place to live. Well, let's go live there so that our kids can get a really good education. So, but that's my pet peeve.
Denise, what was your
So-
question?
So if let's say our numbers do rise. The problem that we're having, especially with the high school, is that it's still too big. It's still bigger than the state number. So we do have the room for some growth if we have to.
That's a good point. Yes.
Okay. All right, I think, if there's no other questions about that, I know Jeff has had his hand up patiently for a while. And patience is so easy for you.
That's true. So I read this that Broadbrook is over by approximately 20,000 square feet.
Right.
I'm guessing it's over by 20,000 square feet if we bring the grade 5 back. Is that why it's over 20,000 square feet?
No, so I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Samantha, that's not based on, it's based on the ed specs, which advocates for some additional space. Is that correct, Samantha?
Yeah, give me one. I'm just pulling up. So, you're looking at the the existing size, or which numbers are you looking at? Just so I can answer the question.
Yeah. Where's that information that you're?
I think he was looking at your preliminary presentation from a year ago.
It's from a while back,
Yeah.
but I just pointed him
Oh.
to the first page of what you sent today.
Oh,
Which
okay.
has
I was going to
all
say
of
that
our
I don't have
current
that pulled
numbers.
up. I can pull it up, but so currently, let's just, and You know what? I can share my screen too, because it'll probably be easier.
So the first page that you,
4,000.
you presented us to, you sent us this afternoon has,
After doing the ed specs, it shrunk way down.
the existing conditions and the facilities planning.
Yep.
Per ed specs, that page.
Yep. So
Yeah.
everyone can see. So currently you have your elementary school is 69,078 square feet, right? So based on your the highest 8-year enrollment, which is 490 for pre-K to 4, we have per the state space standard, you're allotted 58,800. Currently, based on how we have the ed spec drafted, we were roughly 20,000 over that, based just strictly on how the ed spec is drafted. So what I think Jim was trying to get at earlier is when you're looking at a renovate to new school, and I know that we haven't been considering new construction for the elementary school, but this kind of applies to the middle high school as well. If your building is technically oversized for your current or your highest.
Answer your question. Sorry, I just
Sorry.
wanted to point out to Jeff that you're answering his question.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Did someone have a question?
You're answering it.
Oh, okay.
Keep going.
Okay, sorry. So currently we have, a little over 69,000 for Broadbrook, right? So if we were to renovate to new Broadbrook, there is a case to say to the state, hey, this is what we have existing. We're going to renovate to new this facility. Would you consider giving us a space waiver for, I think it's
4,000 square feet.
yeah, around 10,000 square feet, right? So that would mean that we
4,000. You're taking your existing size per square foot for BBES, comparing that against the draft ed spec, the next column over.
Yeah, but I'm saying, oh yes, you're right. Yes, sorry. So
So
you're
we have
roughly
70,000. We need 73,000. The state
correct.
only wants to give us 59. Instead of making us take space down, can we get a waiver for the 3,000 square feet?
Right.
That's what you're articulating.
Yes, exactly. Sorry. It's
Yeah.
it's hard to
I mean,
it's hard
something
to explain.
I know I've been pointing out too is, and this conversation came up with, the architects as well. Is it does like, FRC occupies, I mean, I believe at least, 4 rooms. Like almost an entire wing itself. It does not include that programming or that student population that occupies. So when you're saying like we're over certain square footage, some of that's easily explained by the space occupied by both FRC and CHC, which provide community-based programs.
So
And
the
so that's really
FR
important to highlight because it really explains some of the overage as well.
And that should help
So-
us with the waiver.
So the
I would
FRC
hope.
program, I do have a question into the state about FRC and trying to see how that applies to space and costs in terms of eligibility, because we've done tons of these projects, right? But I don't think we've done any with an FRC program. And if you look at the statute, it says that per the statute, the FRC program has to be in a public school. However, if the commissioner deems it an exception, it does not have to be. So I don't know how that technically applies to when you're looking at grant reimbursement and things like that. So I'm waiting on a response from them. But Patrick is right. It does account for the ed specs, how we have them currently drafted, account for the FRC.
Just one point is that doesn't include 5th grade here.
Correct.
Correct.
We all
Fifth grade
understand that.
still,
5th grade is gone.
5th grade is at the middle high school.
No, that's where the administrators want it, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I could so I can tell you, like, we went through like a pretty extensive, like, pro and con list. I can tell you it's, based on interviews with our administrators, with our teachers as well. When we looked at student growth, we see some of our greatest, growth, based on the current 5th grade model. And then some of the other things we looked at, was, like if 5th grade was moved to the elementary, things that we would see is we'd see the elimination of participation for for fifth grade and middle school sports, which honestly I was actually surprised by some of our numbers. So this past year we had 10 fifth graders cross country, 3 in basketball, 19 in track, 4 in softball. It'd be the removal of fifth grade from their participation in student council and middle school related activities related to student council field trips. Right now, we have after school activities at the middle school twice a week. We have 11 options, which is offered to fifth grade. They would lose those opportunities. Currently, if you're in the middle school, the way the schedule works based on ratios is and the model, because they're really falling into that middle school, they would have a reduction of daily electives from 2 to 1 a day. We'd have to re-examine talented and gifted because it currently starts at the middle school at fifth grade. So, could we still split the teacher, or would it have to start at sixth grade? We know smaller schools work. It would make our elementary school close to 600 students in the building with FRC. And then there would be some logistical things that we'd really have to take a closer look at. Like we would definitely need another PE teacher at the elementary. Currently, we've strategically been able to, we have plans to extend without increasing staff world language to fifth grade. That would be much challenging to do. Behavioral support. There'd be a lot of logistical things with our specialist teachers that would have to be resolved. That could most likely lead to increased staff. Some of our special ed programs, we would have to expand at Broadbrook. Increased transportation costs, potentially. So if you add 80 kids to the building, would increase, because we pay by the buses, not necessarily the bus run. So it could be fewer buses at the middle school and high school, but it could be more buses in the for the Broadbrook run. So if it adds buses, it could be an expense. So
That decision, fifth grade decision, Patrick, is made by the Board of Ed, correct?
regarding
Where it's located, where fifth grade is located.
beliefs.
Our decision. I mean, certainly with, recommendations from the administration. I think at the end of the day, the Board of Ed is the one that's responsible for that.
Can we get a list of all of the things that we're going to have to vote on? Because I think that's important for us as a group to know.
This group only takes one vote,
Right.
and
I'm
that's,
talking like Board of Ed, like what are some of the things that we really need to consider that we're gonna have to vote on? I mean, this is something we should talk about very soon.
I
I know
think,
we have a meeting on Wednesday.
yeah, we have a meeting next Wednesday instead of our regular board meeting. And I think it's for that, to make sure that, and Kate and Patrick can look into that piece. It's not really this committee that would.
Right.
Make that kind of thing, but,
I would just say something that is probably relevant to this committee. As a parent of 2 littles, I do not like the idea of the 5th grade being with the 12th grade at all. I understand the points that Dr. Tigran has raised and that they're thought out and considered with professional staff. And I'm not really going to weigh in on that from an emotional standpoint, because I don't really think that's beneficial to anybody. What my focus would be is which configuration yields us the greatest square footage to accomplish the project in total. I can park my personal, very strong reservations about, a 10-year-old being with an 18-year-old. But I think that the question is, how can we get the biggest bang for our buck? What's the most efficient configuration that allows us the most space? That's the thing that, and I don't know what the answer to that is. We talked about it, I think at the EdSpec meeting, but I honestly didn't follow it.
Yeah, so I will, and maybe Samantha can answer that better. So, 2 parts of that. One, I understood primarily from, Jim. I thought he made it pretty clear that, to your point, to your question, it was it made the most sense from that standpoint for fifth grade to remain as part of the middle school model. I mean, Samantha, you clarify if I understood that incorrectly from our previous like meetings and summaries.
Is
Because
that,
it's-
is that, are
yeah.
you saying that's what Jim was saying?
Yeah, as far as like for a financial and space.
utilizing the existing space and getting the waivers, making it sellable.
I think he
thought-
was more, I don't think he was saying that in terms of like,
No,
it's
taking
more
the educational
beneficial.
part out of it. I'm not saying the educational, just strictly about space and reimbursement.
So, Sam, so basically what we're saying is the more students we have at the high school, the larger we can maintain the size we have.
Correct.
So, and we need fifth grade to make that happen at the high school, correct?
Is that true though? Because the space standards per student vacillate depending on where you get in age. So what's the secret sauce that gets us the most in both buildings?
So like, let me put it this way. The higher the grade level, the more space per student you get. So if you were to move fifth grade over to the elementary school, that increases the amount of space that you're allowed because fifth graders obviously account for more space than a first grader. If you were to move fifth graders over to the middle high school, yes, you add more space because you have more students. I don't know if it really benefits you because they're the lowest grade level. So you're not adding as much as if you were to have 100 fifth graders and add those to the middle high school, it would be different than if you were to add 100 12th graders because the 12th graders are the ones that are going to give you more space. Just as an example. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I know
So
there was a rubric at one point that kind of like spelled that out, but
yeah,
I
I can show you. Let me just pull it up. I can show you the space sheet. And I think I went over this at the last meeting too. I think ultimately, and based on where we are currently, we just need some sort of direction as to how everyone wants to proceed in terms of are we keeping fifth grade? Are we at the middle high school? Are we moving it to the elementary school? And if that's what we're going to do, okay. But then we really need to look at the high school and even the elementary school again to start reducing some space and making it a little bit more aligned with what the state is asking or is saying that you can have for space. Again, it does make more sense for the middle high school to do a renovate to new because you're already over the square footage. You're a little bit closer to where we are at the ed specs, and you can make a case for being a little bit over the space standard. To go to legislators or go to the state and say, hey, like we want to get a space waiver because we're 30, 40, 50,000 square foot over the space standard. It's going to be a challenge. I mean, they could surprise you and say, yeah, sure, here you go. It's all good, but it's definitely going to be a challenge.
So Samantha, part of the space question also has to do with an answer from whoever it is that you contacted about FRC, because that will gobble up space at the Broadbrook School. When do you anticipate getting that answer?
I don't know, unfortunately. I'll follow up with them again. It's basically a batch email that the state has created for for if you have questions. So it goes into one inbox and then it gets filtered amongst who would be responsible for answering it. So I don't know when I'm going to get an answer. I'll follow up with them again. But it's at their discretion when they want to respond. I can only follow up and see if they give me an answer. Unfortunately,
That would be really important for our discussion, for the Board of Ed's discussion next week about the vision of the school and the space that we need. Is there any other source for that kind of information?
It really would be the Office of Grants Administration because they're the ones that essentially dictate reimbursement eligibility, all that stuff. And that's who I sent it to. I can see if maybe there's someone else at the state that could give us an answer, but they're really the ones who would be able to provide that information. So, like I said, I'll try reaching out to them again and seeing if they can get me an answer. Or if I'll ask in the office too tomorrow if there's anyone, another PM that may have someone that could answer that question.
Thank you.
Can everyone see my screen? And I
Granted, they made it a
apologize.
bit bigger.
Yep, I know. I always forget that, Jason. Um, so this is, and like I said, we went over this a few weeks ago too at the last meeting, but this is the space standard worksheet that the state uses. And you can see that based on the overall enrollment, every grade level is essentially assigned a square footage per student. So, and this sheet automatically calculates. So what you do is, like, for example, if we were to do Broadbrook, we have pre-K to 5. So it accounts for pre-K all the way through 5. This is the total number of grades pre-K through 12. It obviously doesn't account for grades 6 through 12 because we're only looking at grades pre-K to 5. It counts up the number of grades housed. It divides the total number of students in all the grades by the number of grades housed. So that gives you an average. And then you input the highest 8-year enrollment. So for example, for the elementary school, it would be 490. And it calculates everything for you. And then you have to input, and I don't have these numbers off the top of my head, but you'd have to input like parts of the structure that were constructed to pre-1950 versus stuff that was constructed post-1950. And it calculates the square footage based on those numbers. So like I said, I don't want to keep beating a dead horse here because I know I've gone over that a few times with you guys, but that's really the per student square footage that's allowed. I don't even know if I answered the question that someone asked.
What's the question?
Giant space interest.
Can I just check with Jeff to make sure did you get an answer to your question?
Yeah.
You sure? You don't have any others?
Yeah, little one. The square footage of the gym, they recommend 5,500. Does anybody know where we're at right now?
70, 8,000.
Almost 8,000. Well, yeah, check your text.
I think I have a text from.
During the meeting, I was
asking.
Shooting the numbers.
So they're trying to drop it 20.
Well, but our gym includes the auditorium or the stage, so
That counts.
So it's just the gym was 5,610, including the locker room was over 8,200.
Is this, which,
no, that's the middle school. It has to be the middle school.
Yeah. That's different.
Jeff, which gym are you asking?
Here. Because that's.
Element. Yeah, I can tell you whatever it is on the draft of the ed specs, like our element would be bigger. Oh, we did adjust.
Yeah, we adjust, I think, forget her name now. Fran. Sorry, Fran.
Not Kevin's friend.
Not you, Fran, the other Fran. We adjusted it as we were going through that meeting because it included, it was just the gym and then it included the storage. So it's big.
Yep.
It's bigger than,
Oversized.
yeah. So that's another fight is to say, you're not gonna make us tear it down, you know, and this is what we have. It's actually our auditorium also.
And if you look at the space matrix that I sent you for Broadbrook specifically, we went through and accounted for the current size of the gym to make sure that was properly accounted for in that space matrix.
Sam, in instances where you have seen space waivers granted, what are we talking about for sizes that the state has signed off on? I mean, is it like 1,500 feet's okay, but 2,000 is not? Is it like 8,000 is okay, but 10,000 is not? Like, what are they signing off on?
I'd have to do some research on that, Jason, because honestly, the special legislation just states typically that a school district is the space standard is waived for them. It doesn't get into specifics about what the actual numbers are. I think the only way that I would know that is if I was involved on the project. I think I could probably get you numbers from the Sherman school that we've been working on. They did get a space waiver. That is a little bit different situation though, because it's a pre-K to 8 school and it's the only school that they have in their district. So it's a little bit of a different scenario, but it really varies from project to project. And I don't have the numbers off the top of my head right now.
Heather, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. One, Samantha, as Denise said, we have a meeting next Wednesday. is there any way between now and then you can just put together a list of the things throughout this process that the Board of Ed is gonna have to make a final decision on? Because
Yeah.
I think it'd be good for us to just make sure we have a summary of all that.
Yeah, so my meeting last week with Patrick and Denise and Jason and Joe and all of us, I offered to come to that Board of Ed meeting.
Okay.
So I just wasn't sure if that was still going to be a dedicated special meeting for, like that, just this topic, or if it was still going to be your standard meeting. So, I'm more than happy to do a presentation that includes all that stuff. That's not an issue.
Yeah, it's, Samantha, it is a special meeting just for that. There are some housekeeping, items, but we have them at the end of the agenda, so.
Okay.
So, it's at 6:00, next Wednesday.
So
Okay.
at that meeting, I know we're having a special meeting. I just want to make sure we as a group all
It's productive.
know exactly
Yeah.
everything.
But Sam's gonna send the list of what they need to do, like,
Prior.
by Friday.
Yeah, I can send that over. Yeah.
Things with that way,
Discussing.
that way we'll be able to have a productive discussion about it. And it'll be great if you're there because you'll have the answers for what we're talking about.
I try
And then
to.
As far as you were just talking about the Sherman School. So in my mind, I'm figuring you probably have a contact person at the state for that school. Is it possible for you to ask them an off the topic conversation or question about our particular situation? So at least we can kind of get some kind of a frame of reference of how the state would look at that waiver for FRC and for the other thing. I know it wouldn't be official, but at least they'd be in that area.
Yeah, I can try. So unfortunately, we don't have like a direct contact at the state. You'd be surprised that you don't actually get direct contacts for certain projects. It's kind of everyone is assigned, within their department or whatever, and they kind of do everything internally. So we don't really necessarily have a direct contact person. There are a few people at the state that I could maybe try and call and get a question about or get a question answered. But again, like if sometimes they're not always willing to answer the question.
Yeah, and I understand like this one person may give you this answer and another person may give you another. And then
And-
when we put in the application, we could get something completely different. I understand that, but I just trying to see if we can kind of at least make these meetings more productive than us just asking you a million questions and not not be able to answer them legitimately because you don't have the answer.
Yeah. I think, like I said earlier, I think the main thing that we kind of need a decision on, is where fifth grade is going to go. And I think, like Joe said, that ultimately would be a Board of Ed decision, I believe. So if that's the decision that needs to be made next week, I think that that's where we kind of need to maybe focus the conversation. Because once we get that figured out and we figure out, okay, it's definitely going to stay in one place or the other, then, GWWO is ready to start doing a conceptual design, and we can do concurrently a conceptual design and finalizing the ed specs, because the conceptual design, seeing it laid out on paper, will give you a little bit better of a perspective to, in terms of what it's going to look like and how big it is and adjacencies of rooms and stuff. Now, it's a conceptual design, so it's going to be very preliminary, but it'll be better than kind of talking just objectively about space and sizes and stuff like that. So that's why I'm kind of, and I think I said in my email that I sent out earlier to Denise, I don't know if she forwarded the actual email, but I think that's kind of where the conversations need to go. And if the Board of Ed is, yep, we're gonna keep fifth grade at the middle school, high school, that's great. We'll take that, run with it, and we'll go full steam ahead on it. But that's kind of where we're at right now. We have the first draft of the ed specs. We've done the space matrices. We've kind of had these conversations. I think we just kind of need to say, okay, what is the actual path forward? What does the Board of Ed feel comfortable with, and how are we going to proceed in that direction? Does that kind of make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Just one
And
piece of information I do want to clarify regarding the fifth grade conversation, and I don't know if this satisfies concerns or not. But like the vision of fifth grade and the middle school is essentially, it's a separate entity from the high school. So it's not like you have, essentially like free, entry, to or from, each building. So a number of the buildings and schools that we visited that did have combined campuses, they are completely separate entities, maintaining like the integrity of the instruction, different bell schedules, different arrival times, different dismissal times. With the exception, I think, for one school building we went to. Again, I don't know if that relieves some of the concerns, but they want to just stress, like, when thinking of the fifth grade, maintaining as part of that middle school community, but still be like the rest of the building, like a separate from the high school. So.
I could just say, having grown up in Waterbury, I went to Crosby High School, which is in the same technical building as Wallace Middle School. And you could not get from one side to the other unless you had, it was not, you had to be a real crafty citizen to be able to do it. And then they virtually always got caught.
I guess one concern I have is that there's 9 of us on the Board of Ed. All with different, backgrounds and families and all of that. And if we guess this wrong, we go one way, and then we go to the community conversations, and we've spent the money on the conceptual designs and the outcry of whichever way we decide, the outcry of the people in the community is, you got it wrong and you got to do that instead.
Was that,
We're supposed to have 3, one starting in March, I think.
right?
Community conversations, is that right, Samantha?
Yeah, that's how I have it in the schedule currently. I will say with that, it's important to have feedback from the community and understand what people want and what people feel comfortable with, and ultimately what the parents of students are going to want. With that said, I think there's a fine line of kind of asking the community what you guys should do versus just kind of saying, okay, this is the plan forward and this is how it's going to work. And I'm not saying to not listen to community concerns or whatever, but I think there just is a little bit of a fine line in that, if that makes sense. Because once you start asking people, like the community broadly, what they want, you're going to get a myriad of various responses and answers from everybody. And it's going to be real difficult to make a lot of people happy.
You never will. You won't make
Yeah. And again, like, it's totally valid to want to hear people's concerns and have people ask questions and provide input. That's 100%, a part of the process. But I think overall, you kind of need to go into it with a solid plan of, this is what we're doing. We're looking at renovate to new versus new construction. We're doing renovate to new at the elementary school. Like, I think going in with a solid plan and being confident in that is going to speak volumes to the community, in my opinion.
Really work for South Windsor too. Like, they have the plan and they stand.
Can I ask a question? And maybe more of a Jason question. So if we were to, as a board, decide to do 5th grade with middle high school, and we get a budget for the whole thing, and then we send it to referendum, and we have a dollar figure, do we have the opportunity, say the citizens, the community members vote yes, but I want the 5th grade over at the elementary school. Do we have the option of just, because the drawings have to be done again, like an architect?
They wouldn't have the option
You
with
can't,
with that
that
ballot
can't
question.
be.
It's just one question.
It's just one question.
No.
Okay, because I was just wondering, like, if we had this is the pot of money, okay, let's decide to move 5th over here because the consensus.
You would also, I believe you need a price tag with that, which you would also need another conceptual design for.
Yeah, you're approving an amount, it generally a not to exceed.
Right,
The projects can always come in under budget and everybody's happy, but as soon as they go over budget, pretty much nobody's happy.
right,
And your authorization is up to whatever the voters say.
but it's just as it is.
It's a solid
okay.
plan.
And actually, I think the plan has to be part of that number. You're not just approving a dollar number. You're saying, we're going to do this with this pot of money and it's going to cost that much money.
Okay.
Yes or no.
Yeah, because you have to submit
Part of
grant
the-
applications. So
Oh,
when you
right,
submit a grant application to the state, if we submitted a grant application saying we're gonna build a middle high school that's 5 to 8, and then you guys decide after, and we submit an elementary school application that's pre-K to 4, and then you guys decide that you wanna move 5th over to the elementary school, you can't, it's not gonna work, because that's not what your funding authorization from the state is telling you.
Just, I mean, I know we have Andrea here from the PTO. I'd just be curious, like, is there topic that comes up among parents that you have, I'd be just interested to hear, like, your input.
Well, just sharing the first time anybody hears that it's going to be a combined middle school, high school, it's exactly what Jason said. No way. That they don't want their 5th grader in with a high schooler. I did go to school here in town when it was a 7th through 12th high school. And the schedule was not as separate as what we're saying it's going to be. We did mingle on the bus, always at arrival and dismissal, and maybe certain other times a day. Jason can attest to that too.
I didn't want to sound like the old guy saying back in the day, but yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, no, I can't say with that.
There too.
Yeah, but I mean, the building, wasn't designed to separate. those versus,
Right. We
like,
had that one
Yeah.
wing. So that's what I hear from everyone I mention it to. They're very excited that this is happening, but that's the first thing I hear is, no, I don't want even they're afraid that the elementary school kids are somehow going to be mixed in there. But I think if we came across with that clear plan that they're not going to see each other at all the whole day.
Do you think that would allay the concern?
I could see that becoming an issue at the vote.
That's.
That was my
I just,
Yeah.
if we've,
I came to the board.
But I guess the question is, what the proper messaging do you
Right,
feel
that's
that
the thing.
satisfies their
I think
concern?
so. I think so. If we can get the word out that it's definitely not what you're thinking.
because I went to school, I mean, it was Waterbury, it was massive.
Yeah.
You know, I graduated with hundreds of kids.
But are we gonna get that across?
Yeah, just last year.
It's gonna be our job.
We were gonna have our conversation. Do we have anything else for them while they're still here?
So can I just add something to that? And I haven't seen this school in person, but I know Fran, who has been working with Patrick and us to do our ed specs. She has a connection to the principal at the Portland Middle School, High School, which is very similar to, from what I understand, your demographic. And if it would make the board feel comfortable, or Patrick or Jason or whoever, I could try to set up, a tour with her of that school, because I think that'll give everyone maybe a good idea of what that school actually looks like in terms of, having 2 separate entrances, or learning from her what she feels is beneficial. Is it beneficial to have 1 gym over 2? Is it beneficial to have, everyone's offices be separate, or do we group all the offices together? So things like that, I think could be helpful. Again, it's just a suggestion, and I just wanted to throw it out there.
Samantha, do they have the split 5 through 12?
I don't believe they have the 5th grade. It's 6 to 8, or 6 through 12.
I think for all.
It is, I believe it is 6 through 12, but I think the size, the number of students is roughly the same.
Yeah.
What was Burlington? So that was
They were 5 through 12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the standard one? I mean, if you were to look at middle highs, what are you usually looking at?
I mean,
Is it, I don't know.
yeah, I mean, you usually see the separation with middles is typically 6 to 8. You might see K to 8 as well too.
So you could see, I'm saying in circumstances where there is a combined middle high school, is that typically 7 through 12, 6 through 12, 5 through 12?
So in my experience, those vary a lot more than say like your middle school, elementary. Like you see more common models with like from elementary to middle versus.
Oh, then it gets all kind of squishy in the middle?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions for CSG or?
7, 12, 6 to 12, 5 to 12.
No, she'll be at our Wednesday meeting, right?
You will be at our Wednesday meeting, Samantha. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for.
Of
setting that
course.
Wednesday.
Of course.
So Sam, this is Jason. The upshot is the Board of Ed will need to decide what's happening with 5th grade. And then they also will need to decide what we're doing with the ed specs.
Well, she's
Well,
gonna
the
give us
fifth grade,
the whole
the fifth grade,
list.
Yes.
yeah, the fifth grade decision does essentially drive the ed specs. So yes to both, I guess.
Well, yes and no. With the ed specs, there's also, the ed specs is the wish list of what everybody has asked for, but then somebody has to review that, presumably amend it in some way, and then ultimately approve it. That falls to the Board of Ed too. There's
Yes.
a list of things that need to happen, but those are the two that are front and center for you guys to start moving forward.
But
Yes,
Jason,
and like,
I don't know if I would say the ed specs is a
Yeah.
wish list.
Sam, correct me if I'm wrong. Ed specs cannot be true until we know where fifth grade is.
Right.
correct. So
Okay.
can I just backtrack a little bit onto what Jason was saying? So yes, fifth grade does drive the ed specs. So that's one. Two, once we decide where that's going, then we need to figure out space and where we're actually going to land. And I think we all need to come together and determine what a realistic number is in terms of being over what the state is telling us. And then three is ultimately the Board of Ed is going to have to approve the ed specs. It's one of the requirements of the grant application. So yes, they should have some review to an extent of what the ed specs look like. The reason why I haven't sent those out to the Board of Ed yet is because we're in a very early draft and I don't want them reviewing something that isn't necessarily fully baked, especially with this issue of the fifth grade. So I think once we get answers on the fifth grade and then who's gonna, how we're gonna work out the space, I think that'll give us and the architect a really good basis to go off of. I will say that the architect did offer to come to the meeting next week if needed. So if that's something that you guys would feel is beneficial to have them there to answer more architectural design questions, I can kind of get that scheduled for you guys. But that's kind of where we are right now. And I wouldn't say the ed specs are a wish list. I think they're more so of like an explanation of the programming and what the needs of the programming are. You kind of start at the wish list and then kind of filter it down.
So Samantha, if we don't even know where fifth grade's gonna be, we don't even have ed specs that would give us, it won't give the architects enough to do a conceptual design. I'm thinking it might be a little early to have them there.
So to be quite honest, we've started including them on conversations about the ed specs because it's important for them to be a part of those conversations, even if they're just listening in, so they can have an understanding of what the needs of the school are. They have a signed contract, they're ready to go. And in their opinion too, working concurrently on the conceptual design and the ed specs is beneficial because it'll help kind of guide decisions for both. If you feel it's too early for them to be there, that's totally fine. But we have been involving them in a lot of these conversations because there's just input that an architect knows that I, or even Jim may not.
Okay, so I guess that will be up to Patrick and Kate to decide.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I mean, their input has been invaluable, their experience. So, I mean, like the things to your point, Samantha, the things you don't think of or, based on their experience, I mean, if they're available, I would, take them any opportunity they're available.
Yeah. And if, I'll check with them and see if they are. And then if we decide that we feel differently, we can also just create a list of questions that you guys have and I can get that to them and kind of get the responses sent back to you guys if there's like specific questions. But yeah.
Any other questions for CSG? Because we have additional discussion, so I think you guys are off the hook. Thank you, Samantha.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
What you brought to the table has been invaluable. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. And if there's other questions, as always, like Denise, Patrick, Joe, Jason, they all have my contact info. So feel free to ask me anything.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Have a good rest of the night.
You too. Bye.
You too.
Still gonna be here.
Yeah.
Was that helpful? Yeah. So, y'all have the answers and they were received today as well at 3 o'clock. They were at the end of the
Yeah.
information. These are the answers to your questions that were submitted last week. You have a chance to read them? Not really. Yeah. You want to take a minute or? I think question 4 was actually answered.
We're asking if we can house the high school students in the middle school during construction.
They're saying the
Nope.
size of middle school is 8,300.
I know, but I don't know if they actually said yes or no.
So the plan would be is the high school kids would stay in the high school and the middle school would stay at the middle school.
While they renovate.
Right, and then they'll just take the high school kid, move them to the other side
Okay.
Yeah, Jim explained that as well too.
to avoid having to rent any modulars or cost factor wise, we could save a tremendous amount.
They just be moved to different sections of the building while
Yeah,
it was on.
like they did JFK. And, hopefully a lot of the work, because we can do that, can continue and summertime. I think Jason would like it if we moved the high school kids to the elementary school,
Oh, he's okay with that, I
as long as his kids aren't here.
Yeah, homeschooling's looking better. No, I'm kidding. They're having a great time here. He's got a very sweet email from a teacher while we were here.
I'll mention that to Alex. She just said homeschool would be great.
Well, I'll tell you, if that happens, I'm the one staying home.
You might want to rethink that one.
Are you all set with the questions, answers? You want to talk about them or? About the miscellaneous?
Was, question 2 about the second floor, was that aimed at a specific school or just?
I thought it was high school, but it was high school.
It was not aimed at this school, if that's your question.
This was always presented as a renovate to new project.
Yeah.
So, some was.
I think in the beginning the beginning theory was too, is we could add a second floor to the middle school and stay on that campus and move the high school there.
Oh, middle school? I thought it was the high school.
No, it was the middle
It
school.
was the high school.
No, it was the middle school.
There was conversation about the high school as well.
No, yeah, but in the beginning, we mentioned that one of the theories is middle school become a middle school, high school in the middle school location and then sell the property on Route 5 because it's more marketable. But never a second for the high school. The square footage there doesn't even warrant a second floor.
Any other questions about the questions? Any answers? Okay, we'll move on to miscellaneous. Any miscellaneous?
Yeah.
I knew that Jeff had some.
So decision for the 5th grade where it's going is going to be the Board of Ed. So that's null and void here. That's nothing good. Our decision making is coming up with new or renovate to new.
Well, we recommend to the Board of Ed.
Recommend.
And we could recommend after the Board of Ed makes a decision on the 5th grade, I think then we could recommend how it falls out.
Maybe our
Within the
next
building.
agenda, our next agenda is to have that conversation because we have as the Board of Ed will have just had our conversation, our vote about five, right? What do you think? Our next ad hoc meeting, we can address what Jeff's asking right now, because our next Board of Ed, I think we have the conversation about fifth grade.
Then the next thing we talked last meeting, she had to have paperwork in at a certain point, or CSG had to have paperwork at a certain point. Jason also had to do something, but it didn't sound like he could get it done in time. We're talking about doing a referendum really quick. Everything's moving fast. Are we still on that deadline, or do we have more time so we're not going nuts here? And
So we're gonna go nuts. We have to have our application in by June 30th. That includes a bunch of motions that have to be made by various boards, the Board of Education, the Board of Selectmen. One of the things that the Board of Selectmen has to do before we can submit our application on June 30th, because of our charter, is we need to have a town meeting on approving the question going to referendum. So that means that I have a real date of probably June 22nd as the drop dead. Now, there is a caveat to that, because we probably can get legislative action to give us an extension on that application period. But we have not asked yet, because we don't know if we're going to need it, and you don't ask for something you don't need. And we also don't know if we're even going to be close at that point. The more meetings that we take saying, I'd like to think about this, and maybe we come back, the more in jeopardy this whole thing becomes.
well, that's kind of my point of doing these meetings, in between having meetings with them so we can talk. So like right now, I think we all want something new. Nobody wants a used car, right? You want a new car. But I mean, how do we get to this point, right? I don't feel like we've got enough information, or if we're going to have enough time. It's not just ed specs are going to be kind of your guys' because that's our part of the education. It's a little bit out of my field. I have questions on where are we going to put stuff? How are you going to get parking? I don't feel like we're going to get any of these answers. And when we get, we talked last time, it's like, okay, we're going to get an AI drive. Well, I could throw one up on an AI right now, and we're going to go over some stuff. So I feel like there's so many moving pieces to make an actual decision here. Because if we do rebuild the existing school, which do we have the placement to put the stuff? And we can't just rely on them for stuff. I mean, some of this is common sense. I can draw a picture. I've got it done at the house 50 times. How is this all going to work?
Well, I think Jeff did that. I thought, and just someone correct me if I was wrong, but I thought that Jim had said that the state is going to look at whichever is the least expensive. And the fact that there's so much square footage at the high school that talking new may end up being the cheaper alternative, because the renovate is new. But that means that we're downsizing, and it's going to make it smaller because it's going to be as
50 to 60,000 square feet.
So I mean, there's a lot
That's
to
just
take
parking
into
lot.
consideration.
You know, that just
There's a lot
No,
to
that's
take
the
into
building.
consideration. Yeah.
Building.
Oh,
It's the actual-
You build new.
by taking it down to that much, it's giving us that extra parking. That's pretty much.
But if we take it down to that much, then we lose
Yes, that,
classrooms for other
We
things.
lose the auto shop and special ed space and like other things.
The size of our gym.
More auditorium.
Yeah.
so this is kind of my point. Like, when are we going to be getting this information to start making some of these decisions to get a little bit deeper down the road here? Because another thing is too, like what you brought up, what we've talked about before, and I've talked with Patrick. Some schools did 2 gyms, but I think to 2 cafeterias, they came in from the side together. That's going to make sense to this town. You do anything secondary of that, I think it's going to.
Well, I think that's why we canceled the meeting for next week of the Board of Ed, so that we have a hard discussion about stuff that then we can come to this ad hocly and say, the board feels strongly that we're gonna do X, Y, and Z, which then makes us be able to say to CSG, okay, here are some hard decisions that have been decided. Can you give us some conceptual, so we know if we can get 2 gyms or 2 cafeterias, or do we have enough parking? We won't know that until the Board of Ed determines some of the things that they have to.
And
Yeah,
two,
I
we have
just- Yeah, I know,
our,
This.
yeah, so Jeff, to your question, like the packet that was provided, to Denise's point, and I know she's made this point a couple times, and I agree with it. Getting the information ahead of time would be helpful, because you don't really have the time to review coming in. I can tell you, I mean, we have a budget proposal across the street at 6 o'clock. I didn't review this because it came in after 3 o'clock, and but if you look at that document, it gives the space, you can actually, it answers some of your questions. So like it'll say like the spaces, it'll say the square footage for how many classrooms. If you go on, but it also has like gym space. So this is the draft of like the square footage for the spaces for that spec. So like it says,
But having, sorry, not to jump,
oh yeah,
but having, we'll call it middle and high school still.
yeah.
Are we gonna still be able to get separate gyms? Are we gonna be able to? So that's,
So right now it's in the ed specs and like, so if you go on the draft where it says middle, so start.
Look at page 4,
Yeah,
page 4 of 10. It's got the physical
Yeah.
education program.
I can go over it.
yeah.
So I think that the question, if we're gonna start to feel like we're going someplace, the decision on fifth grade needs to be made and some sort of a version of the ed specs needs to become available because that gets you, it gets you to the square footage that you need versus the square footage that you're gonna have available.
Yeah.
That's coming. But we, somebody's gotta make a decision.
And the other caveat is once that decision's made, then the architect sits right there and you hammer on what you want, the whole board. Tells them, we want 2 cafeterias, we want 5 gyms, we want
Separate buildings.
separate buildings. Patrick gets his own office, and all that stuff gets all laid out. And then they go to their,
Okay.
but until we tell them, we're just, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just juggling balls trying to guess, and then they'll look at school, okay, they'll say, all right, you can have a new school, but it's gonna be 74,000 square feet.
And
Okay.
here's how you're gonna fit.
And
what-
this is how you're gonna fit all this into that
You're
one
not getting
space.
The two
Or
areas.
you could take the 180 or 128,000 square feet you have now, and this is how we can make it work. And,
And you preserve your
Right.
auto.
but you are basically in limbo until the Board of Ed makes a decision and they start to narrow down the ed specs, because then they can decide the classroom sizes and the whole square footage of everything. And then you tell them what you want.
And I have been assured that it sounds like a mess and it feels like a mess a lot right now, but that it does sort of fall into place once a couple of decisions are made, you're gonna see some progress and then it'll fall quickly into place.
Yeah, so the question you asked is, the question I actually asked, last Friday, and it was with the architect, and he did indicate like that's where they come in. So, because, the question I asked about the conceptual design is, are you coming, and designing it based on, like taking all this and saying, okay, now I gotta squeeze and make compromises and do it within the recommended square footage? Or are you doing it based on like what we've indicated our needs, like, for example, a gymnasium each for, middle school and high school? And then, coming back with us regarding, the conversation, stating like you're this, many, square footage over, and there has to be like compromises and, how are we going to identify our priorities? And he said more of the second one. So that was my question. That was his, response. And they also said, like through their experience and their designs, there's, creative solutions, maybe not to everything, but to, assist, in that process. But I will tell you, and we went through a number of schools. I mean, I think I've been through 5 different school districts, so it's all a blur which one was which. But I do remember one school district in particular where they said like originally, like, so it was a combined campus. They said originally in our original plans, we had 2 separate entrances. One of the compromises they gave was it was one entrance. There was like, there's was it Cannon?
I think it was.
It might have been. So there was like certain things they go through and said, we compromised on this because it saved X amount of dollars. Like we were essentially like above, but we had to get under budget. So
Kind of backpedaled and wish they never did that portion or didn't.
yeah, so I anticipate there will be difficult conversations in the process.
Yeah.
But my understanding is like, we're not there yet.
And could you say that you do pay for something? Brandon?
Yeah, with respect to the decision regarding 5th grade, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the first time that's come up as a topic of things, that's something that needs to be voted on. And I'm just wondering what else sits in here, to your point, that we have to vote on. Is there anything, what other timely things do we need to have?
Samantha is gonna provide us with that information.
I've read it.
It was brought up at the last meeting. The last time that CSD was here, that was one of the things they said, that fifth grade is integral into the whole and where it's gonna lie. I don't think they said at that point, the Board of Ed's the one that decides it. But they, I mean, my head was spinning at that meeting. She was.
I mean,
Yeah.
she was,
all
but
kinds of
I mean, I
things up.
think that
But to come to a point where it was a crux, do we need to put the fifth grade with the high school? And I was assuming because we have fifth grade is with the middle school, that it would just go,
Yeah.
and there would, you know,
Yeah.
our middle school.
Yeah, so to your
high school.
point, like we had felt that was pretty clear. I will tell you, it's a constant question that CSG continuously brings up as a topic. So it's not something that we've brought up as a topic. It's one that they have repeatedly
Okay.
brought up. So I'm not quite sure what they're looking. Huh?
Well, they're adamant because it's the Board of Ed that's supposed to decide that, not
No, but I mean,
not us.
from our perspective, or at least in mine, this was pre-K through 4 and 5 through 12.
Mhm.
And
They've got
that's
to
what
take a
it has
vote
been.
affirming that.
Yeah,
That's-
but
They
this
talked
was-
about that,
I
like
never
the
had a vote.
administrators did discuss
CSG
it.
has never said
But
that.
the administrators are not the decision makers.
No, but I mean, Patrick discussed how we talked about different options. So I thought we'd already made that decision.
On to public participation, or are we done here?
It's the same as, you know,
I'm part of the committee. I'm an ad hoc.
That is true.
So I just don't sit at the table because I'm not a voting member. I figure it's better if I sit here. But though those discussions were all brought up at the middle school in our first, when we all sat down, selectmen, Board of Ed, trying to decide what are we gonna do from the HVAC standpoint, we can't do it.
right.
And then it was, well, how do you want to do this? And then it was tossed around there, fifth grade come here, fifth grade go there. You know, they've never been told exactly.
If you ever tossed it around.
But that's the thing.
I think really what's brought it to a head is that the space is so
tight. And I get
that
that.
mine, can we preserve the high school and have the fifth grade in there and still have enough room for the programs that we want? I think that, from my take from CSG, that's what they are trying to figure out. Is it something that we want to consider? Maybe we don't want to consider it in.
why don't we just make sure that we have all of the questions that we as a board are going to have to make, that we're not going to have another meeting where they say, well, we need the Board of Ed. Because, I mean, and I agree to Jason's point, is if we had known that it was if we needed to make that, we would have done it a month or two ago.
Yeah.
And we only get 2 meetings a month. And I think for us to have, we can't always cancel a meeting to have this
Right.
kind of a meeting that we're gonna have. So let's get all the things that the Board of Ed needs.
But weren't we clear to Samantha that that's what we wanted?
Yeah, that's all right. I'm just,
Let's get
so we can,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just, so we can go on to miscellaneous or whatever else we want to talk about. So.
I think we're on miscellaneous.
Yes. Well, I just, my thing was, I felt a little not under the gun, but like under the spotlight unnecessarily, like we skipped a step on the Board of Ed.
Yeah.
But
I don't think so. I don't think we did. I think it's just becoming the hot topic now.
That's
The decision
fine.
has to Be made. And you're right. We were not made aware seriously. It might have been said in passing or
Yeah.
something, but that we actually have to take a vote on X, Y, or Z.
which, yeah, as long as, if we get that,
list.
that list before our next meeting, well,
By
before
Friday.
Friday, then that's
By
good.
Friday. And the other thing is, I might add is, I guess my somewhat of a role is between you and CSG. If you need something, tell me. I'll get it from them. And you know I will. I'm very persuasive. So. No, persuasive.
Okay, we want to move on to public participation. Anybody? A motion to adjourn in order.
So moved.
Motion made by Jason, seconded by Heather.